How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, December 15th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I will go through the selection process for the round of 16 matches that have been drawn, and I will lay out the preview for the round of 16 as we navigate through the UEFA Champions League tournament one round at a time. And with that said, first off, this has been quite the journey as we started this season back in September. The very first matchups being played on September 14th, at least once we made it to the group stage. That's when we started paying attention. And from then, from September through December, all 32 teams played in 8 different groups as they competed with one another to compete to make it to the round of 16. In each group, each team played the other 3 teams twice, and the 2 teams that had the highest amount of points in the table were the teams that advanced to the Champions League round of 16 knockout stage. The third team the teams that landed third in their table had to be dropped to Europa League to contend in that tournament, and the teams that finish at the bottom of their table will not advance to either. So with that said, I'm going to preview the round of 16 by looking at each individual matchup as we get into it. So the very first 2 matchups are going to be taking place on February 15th. One of the matchups, of course, is going to feature Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid. PSG enters this spot after finishing runners-up in Group A to Man City. They finished with 11 points in the table. They ended up winning 3 of the matchups they played. They drew 2 and then they lost 1. In the very first matchup that they played, PSG actually ended up drawing with Club Brugge 1-1 as their lone goal came from Ander Herrera. In the second matchup, they ended up beating Man City 2-0 as their 2 goals came from Idrissa Gueye and Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi's goal in Champions League in their matchup versus Man City was actually the first goal that he scored as a member of PSG. Looking at their third matchup, PSG was able to beat Leipzig at home 3-2 as Kylian Mbappe, their elite French forward, scored their first goal, and then Lionel Messi, their goated Argentinian midfielder, scored their 2 goals in the second half. After RB Leipzig had already tied, so he was able to score the tie. He was able to tie the game, and he was able to give PSG the lead with a penalty kick. That's how they were able to win. They won their third matchup. Going into their fourth matchup, PSG went to Leipzig, and then when they went to Leipzig, they drew 2-2 as both of their goals came from Gini Wijnaldum. In their fifth matchup, PSG went to Manchester City, where they fell short to Manchester City. Man City won that one 2-1. PSG's lone goal coming from their elite French forward Kylian Mbappe. And then, of course, in their final matchup, PSG hosted Club Brugge, where they won this matchup 4-1, getting a pair of braces from their elite French forward, Kylian Mbappe, and their goated Argentinian forward, Lionel Messi. And with this, that is how PSG was able to land here. And now they are going to face off in this round against Real Madrid. Real Madrid enters this matchup after finishing first in Group D, as they won 5 of their 6 matchups, and the only matchup they didn't win, they lost. And they're looking at how Real Madrid got here. In their first matchup, they beat Inter Milan, and Milan 1-0 as their lone goal came in the 89th minute from Rodrigo. Real Madrid's second matchup would see them losing to Sheriff Tiraspol, the reigning Moldovan champs, as Real Madrid's lone goal came off of a penalty kick from their elite French striker Karim Benzema. Looking at their third matchup, Real Madrid faced off at Shakhtar Donetsk, in Ukraine. Real Madrid was able to win this matchup 5-0, as in addition to an own goal, they had 2 goals from their Brazilian forward Vinicius Jr., another goal from one of their other Brazilian forwards, Rodrigo, and then their last goal was a cherry on top from their elite French striker Karim Benzema. And their fourth matchup, they would actually host Shakhtar Donetsk, and in this matchup, they were able to pull off a 2-1 win, both their goals coming from their elite French striker Karim Benzema. Also looking at how they fared in week 5 of this matchup, they were able to beat Sheriff Tiraspol in Moldova. Their goals coming from David Alaba, Toni Kroos, and Karim Benzema again. And looking at how their last matchup fared, they were able to pull off a 2-0 win versus Inter, as their goals came from Toni Kroos and, of course, Marco Asensio at the moment. So that is the very first matchup that is going to be taking place. At the same time, on February 5th, that Tuesday at 3 o'clock, Sporting CP, the reigning Portuguese champs, are going to face off against Manchester City. First, looking at how Sporting got here, Sporting was able to make it here after they finished as the runners-up in Group C below Ajax. They finished with 9 points, as they had as many points as Borussia Dortmund, but they were able to beat Dortmund on a tiebreaker. Sporting won 3 of their 6 matchups, and they actually lost the other 3. Looking at Sporting's road here, they first made it here because they won the Portuguese league. They were the champion out of their group in Group C. In their very first matchup, they would go on to face off against Ajax, and in their first matchup, they lost 5-1 to Ajax, with their lone goal coming to Paulinho. Their second matchup would find them losing to Dortmund 1-0. As after the second matchup, they still had no points. In their third matchup, they beat Besiktas 4-1 in Turkey, with 2 of their goals coming from Sebastian Coates, a penalty kick coming from Pablo Sarabia, and an 89th minute goal coming from Paulinho. Their week 4 matchup saw them playing Besiktas again, and they were able to pull off another big win. They beat Besiktas 4-0 the second time. They got 2 goals from Pedro Goncalves, their first one being a penalty kick. Their second goal came from Paulinho, and their third came from Pablo Sarabia. Taking a look at how they fared in the 5th matchup, they hosted Borussia Dortmund, and they were able to pull off a 3-1 win, which actually gave them the leverage over Dortmund. With their goals, they had 2 goals from Pedro Goncalves and Pedro Porro. And looking at their very final matchup, after their 3-match winning streak, they would go on to lose to Ajax 4-2, as their 2 goals came from Nuno Santos and Bruno Tabata. Because they had the tiebreaker, Borussia Dortmund will be the team that gets relegated to Europa League, and Sporting will be the team that made it to this round. And because they were runners-up, they were drawn with the champion, and the champion that they were drawn, of course, was Manchester City. Manchester City made it here after finishing at the top of Group A, which was the same group that had PSG. They had won 4 of their 6 Champions League matches, as they had lost the other 2, which gave them the 12 points that they needed. In their very first, they made it into this group, of course, after winning the Premier League to make it in the first place. Manchester City hosted RB Leipzig for their first matchup, pulling off a 6-3 win. Their goals coming from Nathan Ake. Their second goal coming off of a Leipzig own goal. Their third goal coming off of a Riyad Mahrez penalty kick, and their second half goals coming from Jack Grealish, João Cancelo, and Gabriel Jesus. Their second matchup would see them falling short to PSG 2-0 in Paris, as this was when Lionel Messi scored his first goal for PSG. Their Man City's third matchup would see them beat Club Brugge 5-1 in Belgium. Their first half goals coming from João Cancelo and Riyad Mahrez's penalty kicks. Their second half goals coming from Kyle Walker, Cole Palmer, and then Riyad Mahrez for the second time. Following that, they would face off against Club Brugge, this time in Manchester, and they were able to pull off another win. They beat Club Brugge in match day 4-1. Their first half goal coming from their English young midfielder, Phil Foden. Their second half goals coming from Riyad Mahrez, their elite English forward, Raheem Sterling, and then Gabriel Jesus in the 92nd minute. Man City's fifth matchup would see them beating PSG 2-1, as their goals came from Raheem Sterling and Gabriel Jesus in the second half after Kylian Mbappe scored the first goal of the game. And then, looking at their match day 6, they ended up losing to Leipzig 2-1 after Kyle Walker drew a red. But RB Leipzig scored the first 2 goals of the game, as Man City's lone goal came from Riyad Mahrez. Regardless, with the 12 points, they were able to win their table, and now in the very first matchup, they are going to first face off against Sporting CP, the reigning Portuguese champs, for just to see who's going to advance to the quarterfinal. Looking at who's going to, and the teams that are going to be playing on February 15th are going to be playing on March 9th, which is the first Wednesday for the second leg. So looking at the first Wednesday for the first leg, looking at the 3:00 matchup, starting with this matchup between RB Salzburg and Bayern Munich. RB Salzburg, the defending Austrian champs, made it here after finishing as the second top team. They finished as the second best team in Group G. That is the group that saw LOSC Lille, the reigning French champs, take the top. Salzburg finished with 10 points in the table as they won 3 games. They drew a match and then they lost 2. Looking at RB Salzburg's road to Bayern in their very first matchup, Salzburg would end up drawing with Sevilla 1-1 as their lone goal came from Lukas Sukic. Our FC Salzburg's second matchup in Champions League would see them beating Lille 2-1 as both of their goals came from their young German striker Karim Adeyemi, as both of his goals came off of penalty kicks. Looking at Salzburg's third matchup, they would end up beating Wolfsburg 3-1. Their goals coming from Karim Adeyemi in the first half, and they got both of their goals in the second half from Noah Okafor. And their second half wasn't necessarily as strong as their first, but looking at how they fared in their second half in their fourth matchup, they would end up losing 2-1 to Wolfsburg as their lone goal came from Maximilian Wöber. Their fifth matchup in Champions League would see them lose to LOSC Lille 1-0 as Jonathan David scored the lone goal of that matchup. And their sixth and final matchup in Champions League would see Salzburg facing off against Sevilla as they were able to pull off a 1-0 win with their lone goal from Noah Okafor being what they needed to finish at least second on the table for the time being. And they are going to face off against Bayern Munich that Wednesday. And of course, Bayern Munich made it here after winning Group E, after winning all 6 of their matchups. They made it there originally after winning the Bundesliga earlier this summer. And Bayern Munich, taking a look at their road to get here. In their first matchup, they beat Barcelona 3-0 at Barcelona. Their first goal coming from their goated German midfielder Thomas Müller, and their last 2 goals coming in the second half from their elite Polish striker Robert Lewandowski. In Bayern's second matchup, they hosted Dynamo Kiev. They won this matchup 5-0. They got 2 first-half goals from their elite Polish striker goated Polish striker Robert Lewandowski. In the second half, their goals came from their elite wing duo of Serge Gnabry and Leroy Sané, and then their 87th minute goal came from their backup striker Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting. Their third matchup would see them beat Benfica, the reigning Portuguese runners-up. Bayern was able to beat Benfica 4-0 as 2 of their goals came from their elite German winger Leroy Sané, and then their third goal came from their elite Polish striker Robert Lewandowski. Their second goal was an own goal off of Benfica. Their fourth matchup would see them face off against Benfica again. They won this matchup 5-2 in Munich. They would see a hat trick from their goated Polish striker Robert Lewandowski, and they would see goals from their elite German wing duo of Serge Gnabry and Leroy Sané. In Bayern's fifth matchup, they would beat Dynamo Kiev 2-1 in Ukraine as their first goal came from their goated Polish forward, Robert Lewandowski, and their second goal came from their French forward who won them the Champions League in 2020, Kingsley Coman. And then last but not least, looking at their sixth and final matchup, they were able to remain undefeated after they beat Barcelona at home 3-0. Their 3 goals coming from their goated German midfielder Thomas Müller, their elite German winger Leroy Sané, and their young German midfielder Jamal Musiala. Of course, with this, that is how Bayern Munich is going to make it here, and that is why Bayern Munich will be facing off against RB Salzburg on the first Wednesday on February 16th. And for the second leg, they're going to face off on the first Tuesday. Looking at the fourth matchups that's going to be taking place in the round of 16, taking place on with the first leg happening on February 16th on the first Wednesday alongside Salzburg and Bayern. We're going to see this matchup between Inter, the reigning Serie A champs, and Liverpool, the reigning runners-up in the Premier League. Inter Milan made it here after they finished second in Group D. That was the group that contained Real Madrid. Inter Milan made it into this was Inter's group as Inter won the Serie A. They were the champions of the group. In the 6 matchups they played, they won 3 of them, they drew 1, and then they lost 2. Taking a look at how Inter Milan was able to chart their way here. In their very first matchup, they lost 1-0 to Real Madrid in September. Their second matchup would actually see them draw with Shakhtar 0-0. So in the first 2 matchups, they actually hadn't scored. Their third matchup saw them beat Sheriff Tiraspol 3-1 as their goals came from Edin Dzeko, Arturo Vidal, and Stefan de Vrij, giving them 4 points after 3 matchups. And their fourth week would see them beat Sheriff Tiraspol 3-1 yet again, as all 3 of their goals came in the second half. Their goals coming from Marcelo Brozovic, Milan Skriniar, and Alexis Sanchez. Taking a look at Inter's 5th matchup, they've hosted Shakhtar Donetsk and pull off a 2-0 win at home, with their goals coming from Edin Dzeko within a 7-minute span, as they were able to win all 3 of their games really in a row. Looking at how they fared in their final matchup, they ended up losing to Real Madrid 2-0 as Nicolo Borello drew a red card in the middle of Real Madrid's 2 goals. But with these 10 points, that was how Inter was able to make it here. And since they finished runner-up in the table, they were drawn with a champion of another table. And Liverpool made it here after Liverpool finished with a perfect group stage as well. They won all 6 of their matchups with a goal differential of 11. Taking a look at Liverpool's road to the round of 16, in Liverpool's first matchup, they were able to beat Milan 3-2 at home. Their first goal was actually an own goal, their first goal of the entire Champions League tournament. Their second goal came from their elite Egyptian forward Mo Salah, and their third goal coming from Jordan Henderson. Taking a look at how they fared in their second matchup, Liverpool would go on to face off against Liverpool would go on to beat Porto in Portugal. They won this matchup 5-1. They would see a brace from their elite Egyptian forward Mo Salah. They saw a brace from their Brazilian striker Roberto Firmino, and they were also able to see a goal from their elite Senegalese attacker Sadio Mane. Following their Week 2 win, Liverpool was able to win their third matchup as they were able to beat Atletico Madrid 3-2 in Spain after Atletico scored the first 2 goals they scored 2 after Mo Salah scored the first. Liverpool scored the first 2 goals of this matchup as Mo Salah scored in the 8th minute. Naby Keita scored in the 13th. Griezmann would score a brace to tie it up, but then it would be Mo Salah's penalty in the 78th minute to give Liverpool their third match day. So on the rebound leg in Week 4, when they faced off against Atletico again in Liverpool would pull away with the 2-0 shutout. Their 2 goals coming from Diogo Jota and Sadio Mane. And in following that matchup, their second goal coming from Sadio Mane, their elite winger. In their Week 5 matchup, Liverpool would go on to beat Porto 2-0. Their 2 goals coming from their elite Spanish midfielder Thiago Alcantara and their elite Egyptian forward Mo Salah. And then looking at their final matchup versus Milan in Italy, they were able to run away with a 2-1 win. After Milan scored the first goal of the game, their elite Egyptian forward Mo Salah would score a goal in the 36th minute to tie it. And then Divock Origi's 55th minute goal would be what Liverpool needed to ensure that they made it through this round perfect. So Liverpool is on an incredible momentum, and now their next matchup ahead of them is a very strong Inter side who made it out of a very tough table. So that's going to be the very first week of round of 16 matchups, and the The Tuesday matchups are going to take place on Wednesday for the second round and then vice versa. Taking a look at the second week of first leg, starting off with the reigning Champions League winners. Chelsea was able to make it here after Chelsea finished second overall in Group H. This was the same group that had Juventus. Chelsea would win 4 of the 6 matchups they played as they drew one and lost the other. Looking at their road and journey to get here, Chelsea made it. They would be in their group because they had won Champions League the year before. But in that season, in the first matchup, they ended up beating Zenit St. Petersburg 1-0 as their lone goal came from their elite Belgian striker, Romelu Lukaku. Chelsea's second matchup would see them matching up against Juventus. And in this matchup, Juventus ended up beating Chelsea as the lone goal came in the 46th minute from Juventus's Italian forward, Federico Chiesa. Looking at Chelsea's third matchup, they would go on to beat Malmo 4-0 as they would see one goal from Andreas Christensen. They would see a goal from their elite German midfielder, Kai Havertz, and they got 2 penalty kick goals from their Italian midfielder, Jorginho. Leading into their fourth matchup, Chelsea would go on to defeat Malmo 1-0 in Sweden, as Chelsea's lone goal in this matchup came from Hakim Ziyech in the 56th minute. Their fifth matchup would be against Juventus, and in their rematch against Juventus, Chelsea would win this matchup 4-0 in London. Their goals coming from Cheva Chalobah, Reece James, Callum Hudson-Odoi, and their last goal coming from their elite German striker Timo Werner. And then last but not least, looking into their sixth matchup where they were actually neck and neck with Juventus, where Juventus actually won their matchup. Chelsea ended up drawing with Zenit 3-3. Their first goal coming from their elite German striker Timo Werner. He also scored their third, and then their second goal coming from their elite Belgian striker Romelu Lukaku. So following this, Chelsea would finish second in their table, and they would be drawn against the champ from their group, and they are going to be matched up against LOSC Lille. LOSC Lille made it here after they would go on to win Group G. This is the group where RB Salzburg finished as runners-up. They made it in this group after winning the Ligue 1 earlier this summer in 2021. Lille would go on to finish with 11 points in the group as they had won 3 of their 6 matchups. They had drawn 2 and they had lost 1. Looking at Lille's journey to get here, they would actually draw with Wolfsburg 0-0 in their very first matchup. In their second matchup, they would lose 2-1 to Salzburg as Lille's lone goal came from Burak Yilmaz. So following their first 2 matchups, they only had 1 point in the table. Lille's third matchup would see them drawing 0-0 with Sevilla. So they had only scored 1 goal and only had 1 point in the they had 2 points in the table following these 2 matchups. But then, of course, taking a look at how their fourth week fared, they would go to Spain and end up beating Sevilla 2-1. Their first goal coming from their Canadian striker Jonathan David, and then Nanitamo Ikone's second goal would be what broke the tie and gave LOSC Lille their first win in Champions League. In their fifth matchup, they ended up beating Salzburg 1-0 as their lone goal came from Jonathan David. And then in Lille's sixth matchup, Lille would go on to face off against Wolfsburg as they were able to pull off a 3-1 win in Germany. Their goals coming from Burak Yilmaz, Jonathan David, and Angel Gomez. And with this last win, they were able to jump to the very front of the table. And because they won their group, they are going to face off against a runner-up. And the runner-up that was drawn for them was Chelsea. And because they're facing off on the second Tuesday for their first leg, they're going to be facing off on the second Wednesday for their second leg. Looking at the other matchup that's going to be taking place on February 22nd, this will be the matchup between Villarreal, the reigning Europa League champs, and Juventus, the team that made it out from the top of Group H. Villarreal would make it to the round of 16 after they finished second in Group F. That was the group in which they finished 1 point behind Manchester United. Villarreal initially made it here after winning the Europa League tournament over Manchester United earlier this summer. And then in the table itself, they would go on to win 3 games, draw 1, and lose 2. Looking at Villarreal's direct path to the Champions League, in their very first matchup, they would go on and draw with Atalanta 2-2. Their 2 goals coming from Mano Trigueros and Arno Danjuma. Looking at Villarreal's second matchup, they would end up losing 2-1 to Manchester United, as their lone goal came from Paco Alcacer, the first goal of the matchup before Man U tied it up and then took the lead. Villarreal's third matchup in Champions League would eventually see them beating Young Boys in Switzerland 4-1. Their goals coming from Yeremy Pino, Gerard Moreno in the first half. In the second half, their goals coming from Alberto Moreno and Samuel Chukwueze. Their fourth matchup would see them face off against Young Boys, but this time in Spain. Villarreal was able to knock off Young Boys again, as their goals came from Etienne Capulle and Arno Danjuma. Villarreal's fifth matchup would see them lose to Manchester United yet again, as Man U beat them 2-0 the second time. And looking at the final matchup of the season for Villarreal, looking at a matchup in which they actually had to fight for it, they had to beat Atalanta 3-2, because if Atalanta had won or even drawn, Atalanta would have gone over Villarreal. Villarreal's goals coming from Arnaud Danjuma, he had 2 of them, and Etienne Capulle, as Villarreal went up 3-0 before Atalanta scored both their goals. So that is how Villarreal ended up here. They finished second in their table, and because they finished as runners-up, they would finish with a team that finished at the top of their group. And the team that finished at the top of their group, or the matchup that Villarreal will have to face, is Juventus. Juventus made it here after finishing at the top of Group H. They finished with 15 points in the table, meaning they won 5 of their 6 games and they lost the other one. Taking a look at how Juventus got here in their very first matchup, Juventus would go on to beat Malmo in Sweden 3-0. Their goals coming from Alexandro, Paulo Dybala off of a penalty kick, their elite Argentinian forward, and then their last goal in the first half coming from their Spanish striker Alvaro Morata. Looking at Juve's second matchup, they beat Chelsea at home, as Federico Chiesa would score Juve's only goal to put them up over Chelsea in the table, at least at the beginning. Their third matchup would see them beat Zenit St. Petersburg in Russia 1-0, as Juventus' lone goal came from Dejan Kulusevski. Their fourth matchup would see them beat Zenit St. Petersburg 4-2 in Turin, as they would get their first 2 goals from their elite Argentinian striker Paulo Dybala. Their 73rd minute goal came from Federico Chiesa, and their fourth came from Alvaro Morata, the Spanish striker. Taking a look at their fifth matchup, they would end up getting housed by Chelsea in London. Chelsea won this matchup 4-0. And then looking at how Chelsea and Juventus went into the last one, whereas Chelsea actually drew in their last matchup versus Zenit St. Petersburg, Juventus would win their final matchup versus Malmo 1-0, with their lone goal coming in the 18th minute from Moise Kean. Because Juventus finished at the top of their table, they were drawn against a runner-up from another group, and that runner-up just happened to be Villarreal. And of course, the first matchup for this for this round of 16 two-leg stage will be played in Villarreal. Taking a look at the matchups that are going to be taking place on the second Wednesday of first legs. The matchup on one end, you'll have Atletico Madrid and Man U, and you have Benfica and Ajax on the other. Looking at Atletico Madrid, Man U, Atletico Madrid would make it here after they finished as runners-up in Group B. This is the B that featured Liverpool. Atletico Madrid only had 7 points in the table, as they had won only 2 of their 6 games. They had drawn 1 and they had lost 3. Looking at Atletico Madrid's journey all the way to get here, in their very first matchup, they would end up drawing 0-0 with Porto. Atletico Madrid's second matchup would see them winning versus Milan 2-1 in Italy, as their first goal came from Antoine Griezmann and their second came from their elite Uruguayan striker Luis Suarez. Atletico Madrid's third matchup would see them face off against Liverpool in Madrid. Their 2 goals came from Antoine Griezmann to tie the game up at 2 in the first half, before Mo Salah's penalty kick would give Liverpool what they needed to win and advance. Their fourth matchup would go, their fourth matchup would come against Liverpool and Liverpool again, and this time Liverpool would win this matchup 2-0. Atletico Madrid's fifth Champions League group stage competition would see them lose 1-0 to Milan at home. And then looking at Atletico Madrid's final matchup, they would have to beat Porto 3-1 in Portugal to earn their way back into the Champions League round of 16. All three of their goals coming in the second half. Their first from their elite French forward, Antoine Griezmann. Their second coming from Angel Correa, and their third coming from Rodrigo de Paul. With this win, they were able to finish with 7 points in the table, which was enough to be runners-up. And because they were runners-up, they would have to be drawn with the team that finished at the top of their table. And they were drawn versus Manchester United. Manchester United made it here after they finished at the top of Group F. They finished with 11 points in the table as they had won 3 of their 6 matchups. They had drawn 2, and they had only lost 1. Taking a look at Manchester United's trip to the end, which saw Cristiano Ronaldo score in every single game. Man U's first matchup would be a 2-1 loss at Young Boys in Switzerland, as Cristiano Ronaldo's 13-minute goal was the only goal scored by Man U this game. Looking at their second matchup, Man U would go on to host Villarreal and win this matchup 2-1. Their first goal came from Alex Telles to tie the game up, and Ronaldo's 95th-minute goal gave Manchester United the win. Their third group stage matchup would, of course, see them face off against Atalanta as they won this matchup 3-2. Their first goal coming from their elite English forward Marcus Rashford after Atalanta scored their first 2. They tied it in the 75th minute with a goal from their defender Harry Maguire, and of course their game-winning goal would come from their goated Portuguese forward Cristiano Ronaldo to win them the game. Manchester United's fourth matchup would see them drawing 2-2 with Atalanta in Italy, as both of Man U's goals would come from Ronaldo in extra time in both halves. So that's how Man U would draw that game. Their fifth matchup would see Manchester United winning versus Villarreal at Villarreal. Their first goal coming from Ronaldo, their second coming from their elite English forward Jadon Sancho. And then, of course, looking at Manchester United's final game of Champions League group stage, they ended up drawing with Young Boys, the team that beat them, as Man U's lone goal came from Mason Greenwood in the 9th minute. With enough points, they were drawn against a runner-up, and the runner-up team that they will face is Atletico Madrid, as their first matchup will take place on February the 23rd in Madrid, and the second matchup will take place in Manchester on the second Tuesday. And then looking at the very final matchup of the round of 16, it'll be the matchup between Benfica and Ajax. Looking first at Benfica would make it here after they finished second in Group E. That was the group in which Bayern Munich won. Benfica would finish with 2 wins, 2 draws, and 2 losses over the 6 games they played, and they edged out Barcelona by a point. They were the team that knocked Barcelona to Europa League. Taking a look at Benfica's trip to the end, taking a look at how Benfica made it to this actual round. In their first matchup, they drew 0-0 with Dynamo Kiev in Ukraine. In their second matchup, they would go on to beat Barcelona 3-0 in Portugal, as they would get 2 goals from Darwin Nunez, their second being a penalty kick. Their second goal was scored by Rafa Silva in the 69th minute to give Porto their first win. Their third matchup would see them lose 4-0 to Bayern. Their fourth matchup of Champions League would see them lose 5-2 in Munich, as their 2 goals came from Morato and Darwin Nunez. So that was a spell in which they weren't scoring any points. Their fifth matchup, however, would see them draw 0-0 with Barcelona. And in their sixth matchup, in which they needed to win in order to make it into this round, they ended up beating Dynamo Kiev 2-0. as their 2 goals came in the first half from Roman Yaremchuk and Gilberto Moraes Jr. So that is how Benfica was able to squeeze in. And because they were runners up, they would face off they were drawn with a team that ended up winning their group. And the group that they were drawn was Ajax. And just like Man U, they also featured a player that scored in every single one of their group stage matchups to today. And they were also one of the 3 teams that won every single one of their group stage match to make it here. Ajax made it here after winning the Dutch league earlier this summer, and they would go on to win all 6 of their group stage matchups as they had a goal differential of 15. The only goal differential whose was higher was actually Bayern Munich's. But looking at Ajax's trip to the very end, in their very first matchup, Ajax would go on to beat Sporting CP 5-1 in Portugal as they had 4 goals from their striker Sebastian Haller. Their third goal came from Steven Berghuis in the middle of Haller's 2 braces, if you want to call it. Looking at Ajax's second matchup in Champions League, they would actually go on and beat Besiktas in Amsterdam 2-0. Their goals coming from Steven Berghuis and Sebastian Haller in the very first half to give them that 2-0 win. Their third matchup would go on to see Ajax beat Dortmund 4-0 at home. Their first goal coming off of a Marco Reus own goal. Their second goal came from Daley Blind. Their third goal came from Antony, their young Brazilian, and Sebastian Haller would score their 4th goal as a cherry on top. Their 4th matchup would see them play against Dortmund in Dortmund this time, and they would win this matchup 3-1. Their goals coming from Dusan Tadic, Sebastian Haller, and Davy Klaassen in the second half. And then taking a look at their 5th matchup, they would go on to face off against Besiktas in Turkey. They would win this matchup 2-1 as Sebastian Haller would score both of Ajax's goals to continue his streak. And in their final game to keep everything perfect, Ajax would, of course, go on and take this matchup as they beat Sporting at home 4-2. Their first goal was a penalty kick from Sebastian Haller, cementing him and Ronaldo as two of very few players that have ever scored in every single group stage matchup in a season. Antony would score their second goal, David Neres scored their third, and Steven Berghuis would score their 4th. So that is actually how all these matchups are lining up as of course, the teams that won their groups are going to be the away teams at first. So, and they are going to be the home teams for the second leg. That's usually how it works. So, looking at how these actual matchups line up, looking at the very first round of 16 matchups for the first leg, the first 2 matchups on the first Tuesday on February 15th, we're going to see PSG host Real Madrid and Sporting CP host Man City that matchup's going to be in Portugal. And the first Wednesday, we're going to see RB Salzburg host Bayern Munich in Austria. We're going to see Inter Milan host Liverpool in Italy. And then on the second Tuesday of the first leg, Chelsea is going to host Lille in London. Villarreal is going to host Juventus in Spain. And then looking at the second Wednesday, Atletico Madrid is going to host Manchester United in Madrid, and Benfica is going to host Ajax in Portugal. Taking a look at the second leg stages, because in the second leg, that'll be the leg in which the teams that won their groups are actually going to host the runners-up. Looking at how those matchups are going to fare, they're going to take place in March. In that matchup, Bayern Munich is going to, in the first day of matchups, Bayern Munich is going to host RB Salzburg in Munich, and Liverpool is going to host Inter in Liverpool. On the first Wednesday of second legs, Manchester City is going to host Sporting CP in Manchester, and Real Madrid is going to host PSG in Madrid. Looking at the second week of the second leg, Manchester United is going to host Atletico Madrid in Manchester, and Ajax is going to host Benfica in Amsterdam. Juventus is going to host Villarreal in Turin, Italy, and then, of course, Lille is going to host Chelsea in France. So that is exactly how all of these matchups are going to fare out, and I want to thank everyone for listening to all 38 minutes of this piece. I also want to thank Google and the various FIFA websites for giving me all the facts and figures that I needed in order to do so. And of course, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope all is well. And of course, once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I am ready to come back tomorrow on Thursday, December 16th for another episode of The Elite. So until then, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope all is well. Thanks for listening to my piece, and I'll catch you with another piece tomorrow. And once the round of 16 is done, I'm going to catch you with a preview for the quarterfinal preview. Peace out.